The Marshall Plan and a Message to the Department of Defense, Labor Day, 2019, by Anna von Reitz. It is a strange fact that those who win wars wind up paying for all the destruction they cause. That is by international agreement, and so, guess who got the bill for World War II? We did. We were the only ones who could rebuild the world. Obviously, the Germans were not in any position to pay anyone back for anything. They were too busy clearing their own streets of rubble. The Brits were in similar condition, hanging on by threads. So when it came time to rebuild Europe, Japan, and places as far-flung as Burma, who picked up the tab? Mom and Pop back home in Des Moines. This was accomplished by the Marshall Plan, yet another stroke of genius drummed up by our military, which should be permanently barred from having anything to do with accounting or finance. Any organization that can lose trillions of dollars off their books, and turn around and find even more trillions of dollars of credit on their books that they can't account for, needs to be relieved of accounting duty. Am I wrong? This same organization is perfectly aware of the exact date and time that World War II officially ended, yet didn't bother to release millions of Americans from paying victory taxes, either. They are dropping their jaws and going, what? What? So tell the General Accounting Office that military accounts are their responsibility again, and we are returning to carriage accounting, because double accrual accounting leads to too much temptation and too many opportunities for guile. Anyway, on to the Marshall Plan. The recovering nations were allowed to place debilitating tariffs against American goods and services, and to profit their own governments on those tariffs. The resulting income was more than sufficient to pay for rebuilding all the wartime damage to Europe, a process that was complete by 1970. These same nations were protected by the American armed forces at little, we are talking 1 to 4% or no cost to them, so virtually all the burden of their national defense was footed by the Americans, too. Good old Joe. All of that should have come to a conclusion around 1970 to 75, at most. The tariffs against American goods and services should have been quietly removed by all the various recipient governments, and our own manufacturing and productive sectors of our economy should have been set free to thrive. Read that the Rust Belt should not exist. Detroit should be thriving. Millions upon millions of American manufacturing and service jobs should have been cranking out a good future for millions of American families for the past 50 years. Should have been. But we have been letting the Pope and the Queen manipulate our government processes and promote their corporate elections while suppressing our lawful government and unlawfully usurping upon us in gross breach of trust. They happily sold us and our best interests down the river and continued to glut themselves for an additional 50 years, and all in breach of international treaties, in breach of trust, in violation of their commercial contracts. 50 years. Richard Nixon, Gerald Ford, Jimmy Carter, traitors all. It's only now that the facts about the Marshall Plan and its gross misadministration are coming to the attention of the American people, and they are beginning to understand just how terribly they and their country have been mistreated. Donald Trump is the first American president in all these years to have sense and guts enough to call a halt to it. Of course, those who have been sucking us dry are disappointed. It's important for the Pope and the Queen and all the other world leaders who have been acting as leeches to understand that Donald Trump isn't the only American who has had enough. There are, in fact, millions of us. Not everyone knows the details yet, but all our backs are up, simply because of the level of suffering and injustice we've endured without relief for 50 additional years of enslavement and taxation and tariffs under wartime mobilization. We are not willing to be killed off in yet another mercenary war, just so they can avoid paying their debts back to us, either. If we go, they go. For sure. That's the hidden double meaning of WWG1WGA. And it doesn't depend just on Trump. This message is for the American military as much as it is for anyone else. You have been used, abused, sacrificed, lied to, and cheated by these same criminal European powers, betrayed by politically motivated generals, and ironically, have been used as the excuse for these abuses and also the muscle to impose them. Ever heard of shooting yourself in the foot? That's what you do when you follow any order to harm any American in any way, including economic harm. Harm doesn't just happen in terms of blood. It happens in economic losses, in terms of lost time and quality of life, lost security and prosperity, lost rights and freedoms. You are supposed to be protecting all of us from all of that, and you have failed your mission for 50 years. That's why Americans are suffering, including veterans. You have been misdirected by foreign powers acting in gross breach of trust and violation of their commercial contracts. And you have followed their orders like so many ducks marching in order. That's why our borders are being overrun. That's why American children are being snatched and killed by perverts. That's why American children are going hungry. That's why veterans can't find work to support themselves and their families. That's why this country sucks. It all comes back to the military, and being lousy accountants is really the least of your sins and errors. This country has been run as a military protectorate since 1863, so when the chips are down, who else is there to blame? 50 extra years worth of the Marshall Plan? An extra 75 years of victory taxes? DoD is responsible by its own admission for providing Americans with proper ID. Instead, the brass have been trying to set up our civilian population for identity theft and mischaracterization, depriving us of our rights, railroading us through kangaroo municipal courts, using us as slave labor to the tune of Yankee Doodle Dandy, genociding us on paper while taking their paychecks out of our pockets, trampling every standard of honor. Everyone from here to Bangkok is wondering what your claim to fame is? Not being worth your salt? Nothing but criminal mercenaries, idiots, clucks, clods, shills, accomplices, treasonous worthless bastards? Words fail to describe what has gone on here in the land of the free and the home of the brave. Millions of Americans have been robbed of their homes, literally, on your watch. Millions have suffered needlessly for the past 150 years, because you have failed your duty to us and failed to assist the actual civilian government of this country to assemble and reconstruct the federal government we are owed. Entire generations of Americans have paid for your protection and instead have suffered as your prey. Well, fellas, the tale is told. What are you going to do about it?